lots of stuff going on. I'm John Crocker. I'm the Director of School Mental Health and Behavioral Services at Methuen Public Schools and the founder and director of the Massachusetts School Mental Health Consortium. I'm joined today by none other than Laura Desorny. Laura, do you want to say hello?
Sure, if I can figure out how to unmute. Yes, hi everyone, Laura Desorny from the Rennie Center. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining.
Cool. So today, my friends, we are going to be talking about needs assessment, resource mapping, and a little bit of resource utilization. So I'm hoping that you can get something out of this that is pertinent to your work. So please ask questions. Please type in the chat. It's going to be way better if you are if you're engaged in this in a way that's going to get you your questions answered. And look who it is. We can start now. Paul's here. Hey, Paul. Paul is from the Bright program. Paul, you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. Good to be here. Great to see you all.
Paul's on the team as well. And what team is that? Well, this team, friends, Thriving Minds. This is a partnership between MASMHC, Rennie Center, and Bright out of Brookline Center. And we have come together to really try and share with you some tips and tricks and resources and PD and coaching around comprehensive school mental health system. So this is not the correct title of the presentation. So I'm sorry about that, but it is the correct presentation overall. So that's good. Let me just make sure. Yes, it is. Okay. So again, collaboration between all of us. I would love to hear a little bit more from you in terms of who you are, your the district that you're representing, and the role that you fill. If you don't mind putting that in the chat, we truly appreciate that so we can get a sense of who's in the room. You can also come off mute if you so desire. That'd be fine. Awesome. We've got Amesbury, adjustment counselor, great. Arlington's here. Franklin Public Schools, excellent. Director of Student Services, welcome, Paula. Erin, you're an LICSW at Everett High School, very cool. Another from Amesbury, Arlington, good. Lawrence Public Schools, Brittany, welcome. Okay, what are you hoping to gain today? You're taking time out of your life to hang out with me and Laura and Paul, talk about comprehensive school mental health systems. What do you want to get out of today's session? What drew you to this topic of needs assessment, resource mapping, and resource utilization? If you could come off mute and share, I would love that. If you feel like you have to type it, that's fine too.
I'm happy to go. I'm Jean Fontaine. I'm from Long Meadow Public Schools. We're out in Western Mass. I might be the only Western Mass district on the call right now. I feel like we don't really know what we need. We know we need something and we need help and our kids need help. But I feel like we've kind of been spinning our wheels as to what we need to do to kind of help ourselves, to help our kids.
Well, you're in the right spot for sure. You know, this session is all about trying to assess needs and figuring out what you have, what you don't have, and filling those gaps. So I'm glad you're here today. That's awesome. Tracy offers increase in mental health crises in our student body. Yeah, for sure. Tracy echoes that. What do we do and where do we? I don't know what that means. But Tracy is, oh, where do we go? All right. Got you. I got you, Tracy. Yeah, that's where that's where this work ultimately has to start, my friends. It's going to be really important for us to get a sense of what we have, what we don't have, establishing a team, and ultimately starting in on the work. Karina, you offer, our schools have such different needs at this time that I would love to gain greater perspective on how to utilize the resources we have available, which are not enough, fact, to meet the needs of staff, students, and families. Love that, Karina. Thank you. Appreciate you sharing. So I now know that some of you know how to type. I know that at least Jean has a voice and can unmute. So I hope you'll continue to participate in this fashion throughout this session, okay? Let's get into it. This is an overwhelming MTSS triangle that is actually made up of multiple multi-tiered systems of support. I share this because I want to make sure that you are all orienting to the fact that you've got some other work happening, I'm sure. Any PBIS districts in here? Quick show of hands. Yep, Anne Marie, cool. How about districts that are focused on academic tiered supports, maybe UDL? Anybody? Okay. What about districts that are heavily invested in SEL? Okay, cool. I want to emphasize that at tier 1, there are no dividing lines on purpose. And the reason for that is because it's really difficult to distinguish between the practices that happen at tier 1. And it is about the practices. I use this silly example. I will continue to use it because it resonates with people, but putting up an agenda, posting an agenda before a lesson, I think we can safely accept that as a good practice. Yes, we're good with that. We like doing that. It's a thing to do. It's also a practice that would reinforce behavioral expectations. It's a PBIS practice because we're pre-correcting off-task behavior and we're explicitly stating what students should be doing. Well, great, check off the PBIS box. You're also prompting students to consider how they're going to choose to engage in the lesson. Well, that sounds an awful lot like UDL. And you're also alerting students to transitions that are upcoming. And that's a trauma-sensitive practice. So let's just lower the temperature on acronym overload and focus on the practices. At the end of the day, if you do the practices and you buy into the ethos of the MTSS, and by that I mean, what's the core message behind things like PBIS and SEL and trauma-sensitive practices? Yes, buy into the ethos of those systems and then just do the practices and stop worrying about the fact that, like, am I doing the PBIS thing right now? I really hope I am. All of these things blend together at tier 1. We're going to focus today on this slice of the triangle when we talk about tiers 2 and 3, primarily because this is a session on comprehensive school mental health systems, but I don't want you to, I guess, fail to recognize that these systems work well together. It's not the case that, and we will have some other sessions where we'll actually talk about the interplay between teams and the commonalities between multi-tier systems of support and where you can really leverage coordination and ultimately get to integration of your teams and your data systems and your practices. But just want to share this, food for thought. What is our goal? Our goal is to establish a comprehensive school mental health system. Who here is familiar with this definition? Quick show of hands. You've seen this before? Lauren, you've seen this. You've been around. Paul knows what's up. Suzanne, cool. Clancy. So, you know, I do want to just kind of unpack this a little bit. We're talking about a full array of tiered mental health services that is inclusive of social emotional learning and mental health literacy at tier 1, and that includes slightly more intense services at tiers 2, and then more intense at tier 3. It's about the intensity of the service. It's not about the modality that you use. You can use CBT strategies and techniques at tier 1. Have you ever heard a teacher talk to a student, or have you ever actually talked to a student and said, hey, I know you're nervous about this test. Why don't you try the first 2 problems? Come back, check in with me. We'll see how it goes. And they go off and they do the first 2 problems. They come back, it's okay. I'm going to keep going. That is an evidence-based therapeutic intervention. That's a behavioral experiment. We just don't call it that. You can now and freak out all your teacher friends and say, good job with that behavioral experiment. We do exposure with kids all the time. Have you ever talked to a kid about how they think, feel, and behave, and they ended up adopting a new perspective and felt better? Does that ever happen to you? Anybody? That's cognitive restructure. So CBT can be delivered at tier 1. It can be a for all by all thing. If you deliver CBT in a slightly more intensive way, let's think of group therapy, for example, 8 to 10 students, 8 to 10 weeks. Yeah, I would call that tier 2. And if we are embedding once we get into tier 3, I think, the level of intensity, the number of people, the programmatic structure is increasing for sure. But again, modality, the specific intervention doesn't necessarily land it in a specific tier. It's about the intensity, frequency of the intervention. That's what really is the calling card of like what constitutes a tier. Does that make sense to people? You with me? Thumbs up? Good. I'll often ask you to do thumbs up just because I like to puppet the people in the room. No. Collaborative partnerships. We still need to be aware of who in our community we can leverage. I will share, yes, it's true that right now community-based mental health is in a tough way in terms of they are at capacity for sure, and leveraging community-based mental health is something that I always want to promote, but I also want to understand the limitations of that, and that there will come a point where we have to reflect on and lean into the idea that it's absolutely essential to build internal capacity to do this work. We can't rely on others to come to the table and service our kids. We should look for those opportunities, but we should also recognize that those opportunities are slim to none right now. 6 to 9 month waiting lists are looking like 1 to 2 years right now. And I just don't want kids to have to wait. Internal capacity building is a big deal. And yes, evidence-based services and supports, that's what we rely on in a comprehensive school mental health system. So thank you for going along on the ride with me around what a comprehensive school mental health system is. These are the national performance measures that are assessed when an individual takes the school mental health quality assessment in the SHAPE system. I will talk about the SHAPE system. I might even demo it. I think that's coming up. But I point to this because when we talk about a needs assessment that needs to be conducted, we do need to orient to the domains of the system that you are assessing needs for. These are those domains. Things like teaming. Have you established a school mental health team, or do you have something like it that you can leverage? Have you gone down the road and actually conducted the needs assessment and conducted resource mapping? That's a big deal. If you don't know your needs, you don't know what you have and don't have, then you can't really operate from a place of understanding in terms of action planning. Do you have tiers 1 through 3 services and supports that are evidence-based? Don't know, gotta ask. Do you screen? Do you measure the impact of your services? And are you sensitive to funding and sustainability? When I started in on this work with the National Center for School Mental Health a bunch of years ago at this point, I was really kind of floored when I saw like marketing and promotion was a domain of a comprehensive school mental health system. It used to be called marketing and promotion. Now they lump it into sustainability. But the idea that if we are going to stand up a really strong comprehensive school mental health system, we need to actually share what we offer in terms of services and supports. And we also need to document and report out on our impact. Why is that? Because we are first on the chopping block during budget season sometimes, unfortunately. We need to show the impact of our services so that we can ultimately sustain those services long into the future. Make sense? Okay. So SHAPE system is going to evaluate your adoption of these components of a comprehensive school mental health system. We looked at a triangle before. Here's another one. I guess I just want to relay the importance of, we don't label kids, we label interventions. Kids move between tiers of support. It's about the intensity of that support, the frequency with which it happens that moves a kid from universal to targeted, but we don't label kids. Fair? Don't label kids. Okay. So as we get into this, I know, a few of you shared really trying to figure out what we have and what we don't have. Wanting to know where to start, wanting to be able to drive an action plan with some understanding of our needs. So let's talk about, like, what do we mean when we talk about needs assessment? It's this attempt to assess or measure a perceived or actual need by collecting data to document a challenge that exists. Now, I'm going to argue that needs assessment can happen for a variety of different reasons. You could have a needs assessment that focuses on the needs of kids. You could have a needs assessment that focuses on the readiness of staff to implement evidence-based therapeutic care. You could focus on a needs assessment that is really about systems level. And that's what we're going to talk about primarily today, but I will throw some information out there about an evidence-based practice needs assessment that I think is pretty critical to designing a professional development plan. This component of a comprehensive school mental health system has these sub-components. So, are we assessing student mental health needs? Are we assessing student mental health strengths? So that's more focused on kids, that part of the needs assessment. Have we assessed the degree to which we have appropriate services and supports? Needs assessment around evidence-based practices. Have we conducted or can we access a resource map? The material and human resources available to us? Do we use that resource map? Do we use our needs assessment to really make decisions? And have we aligned our existing mental health services and supports? All questions that are going to be unpacked when you get into that needs assessment piece of the SHAPE system. I talked about this a little bit, maybe a minute ago, but these are some flavors of needs assessment that I think are important to orient to. You've got that systems level needs assessment that is really looking at the components of a well-functioning system, things like, and the things that the SHAPE system is going to point at ultimately. You've got a needs assessment that's really about staff readiness and PD needs. That EBP needs assessment that's linked in here is yours to steal, and I'll explain what it actually does a little later. You've got a needs assessment that can look at presenting issues or students' social emotional competence. And then you can look at staffing needs assessments. Think of like the school mental health profile that's in the SHAPE system that's going to help you to understand your staffing model and a little bit about the different roles that exist within your district. Let me hit pause for a second. How are we doing? Is this making sense? We're good? Any questions at this time? Okay, let's keep going. So I've mentioned this a few times. The needs assessment is really an attempt at determining what you have and what you don't. And there are some resources that you can certainly draw upon to get at that. I think that when I think of the what do we want, what do we need question, a lot of times in this space, I hear questions about staffing. I hear questions about like material resources. I hear less about systems level questions, but I think that that is a really essential piece that we need to unpack, especially those of you who are undertaking this work as a team that is really looking to establish a sustainable system. It's going to be pretty important for you to understand the systems that exist or don't exist that you can leverage to be able to get at the outcome of a comprehensive school mental health system. These are a few examples of needs assessments that we conducted early on. Actually, probably this was before the SHAPE system. So we conducted an SEL needs assessment, which is really an assessment of our students' social emotional competence. And that data ultimately helped us to understand the curriculum that we needed, the resources and training that were necessary to be able to address that need. It helped us to understand the specific competencies that our students were lacking. This EBP needs assessment, I talked about that a little bit. it helped us to understand what we were already implementing in terms of evidence-based practices, and also what training was necessary to get our people up to speed in terms of specific therapeutic modalities or curriculum-based resources that they were lacking in training. And this presenting problems needs assessment, actually that one was conducted over a couple years, and we looked at caseload notes from our mental health staff across the district and really did a deep dive into thousands and thousands of data points around like what are the presenting issues that our kids are coming to the table with. And let me save you 2 years worth of work. It was anxiety and depression and trauma, what you would expect to see. I mean, I could throw darts at a map and be certain that anxiety, depression, and trauma are issues in that district. So in some ways, I think we do need to just accept the national prevalence rates as being things that we can look to guide our decision-making around what to focus on. I do want to honor the uniqueness of each district, but I also want to be smart about the work that we conduct and not waste time conducting an unnecessary needs assessment. I do think that sometimes we can get mired in like wanting to do the perfect thing. And ultimately, we know tomorrow, if we could address the needs of our kids, the anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress needs of our kids, that would move the dial on a big portion of our population. So we can conduct that work like now. So just food for thought there. I wouldn't want you to have to undertake some work that ultimately would point at a very glaring and obvious thing that you need to address. So I've mentioned the shape system a little bit. I think I'm going to do a demo in a minute, but while I'm logging into the shape system, let me hit pause here. Let me explain really what it does, what it is. So the shape system is designed to measure the health of your comprehensive school mental health system. It is an attempt at, hold on, let me share. No, there we go. It is an attempt at really helping districts to understand what they should address first, and also what they're doing really well so that they can capitalize on low-hanging fruit. So let me log in and give you a quick tour of the shape system. And by a show of hands, who here is familiar with the shape system? Who here has taken a peek at this before? People? Okay. All right. I do want to get into the correct account because I don't want you to judge me and my district, even though we have a perfect score. No, of course not. So this is the demo account for Massachusetts. So when you log into the shape system, you get yourself a district level account. It's going to have this landing page. It's going to show you all the different things that that ultimately can be conducted in the shape system. I will take you through each of these tabs just to give you a little bit of an understanding. What you're going to get out of engagement with this tool is you will be conducting a needs assessment for your comprehensive school mental health system at the systems level. This is not going to give you information about your specific kids. That's a different kind of an assessment, but this will help you to understand the components that you need to stand up such that you can sustain this work. Yes, Karina, you'll receive a recording of this workshop. No problem. So the school mental health profile, what does this do? This is going to return data for you around the students served, the different data systems that you have established, the staffing, the services and supports that you have. We're going to do a little bit of an activity in a little while around mapping out your tiered services on a fun MTSS triangle on a Jamboard. You're going to love it. Let's click on here. We'll take a look at the summary report. So if I fill this out and I take the time to do this with my team, it's going to return some information that I can use to be able to make some decisions about next steps. Here is a quick view of the services and supports that this fake district is ultimately implementing. You'll get a sense of the data systems that are in place. What are those data systems used for? You'll get some staffing information. which is pretty important, especially if you're in a very large district, where maybe getting a sense of getting your hands around who does what and how many staff are in this building becomes an exercise in futility if you don't ultimately have people at the table that can speak to this well. And then I do like this. It produces a little bit of a graphic to help you understand. Here are some presenting issues, and here are the ways in which we're addressing those issues across tiers of support. So if I take a quick glance at that, I'm feeling pretty good about our universal and tier 2 supports for anxiety. I'm really confused about what we're doing in relative to attention and hyperactivity. It seems like we've got some tier 3 stuff going on when we refer to community-based providers, but there's really nothing happening universally. And then there's certainly some gaps in terms of tiers 2 and 3. So helpful overview, not perfect, but gets some discussion going with your team. Okay. Let's click out of here. That's the school mental health profile piece of this. The core assessment within the school, within the SHAPE system, is this school mental health quality assessment. And here are the 7 domains that I referenced earlier on that slide that had kind of like the 1-page overview of the domains. So each of these domains is really, you can take these assessments domain by domain, so you don't have to kind of do it all at the same time. When I'm talking to teams about the SHAPE system and the quality assessment, what I typically say is, if you are the person facilitating this discussion with your team, please take this on your own the first time with no one else in the room. Just orient to the different questions, get used to the language, get a sense about who else should be at the table when you take this as a team. I'm sure you've all been part of meetings where you can get incredibly sidelined by a single word or phrase. People like to wax poetic over what a specific question asks. So I think you can be a little more prepared to get beyond that if you've gone through and you know really what these questions are asking. So take it by yourself and be ready you'll be more prepared to facilitate that discussion with your team if you know what they're talking about. The summary report's pretty great. You can break it out by different domains. You can take a look at this overview. So when I take a quick look at this, again, fake district, I'm seeing that they've got some needs related to screening and also early intervention and treatment services. Their scores aren't really great there. But they've got a couple bright spots. Mental health promotion services and supports, 4.6, pretty good. They're almost in the mastery. Looks like funding and sustainability are pretty good. And I can go deeper with this and go domain by domain and really get at the subcomponents for each domain. So if I notice if I notice up here that teaming is an area that I really want to address, I can go a little bit deeper and say, all right, well, what aspects of teaming am I lacking? You tell me. If you were taking a look at this report for your district, what would you call out as the things that maybe need to be addressed pretty quickly? Come on off mute. I know that you can do it.
Multidisciplinary teams that address all tiers.
There you go. It's a good call. Appreciate that, Paul. What's a bright spot that you're seeing that you're like, yeah, they're doing a pretty good job there. This aspect of teaming has been taken care of. Friends, it's 4 o'clock. I know that, but you're still with me for an hour.
Effective referral process.
There you go. It's not that bad, right? So if I'm taking a look at this, I want to orient to both of those things. The thing that Paul brought up, which is a relative weakness, but also, Gene, yeah, relative strength. I might want to double down on that effective referral process to community services. I might want to understand why that's working so well so that I can replicate that in other buildings, so that I can maybe ensure that that piece is sustained. So it's about taking a look at both strengths and weaknesses and making a decision as a team about what to address next. Make sense? I hope so, because I'm going to ask you to do this in a minute. Okay. Beyond the quality assessment, there's a lot of other stuff in the SHAPE system. If you click on the resources tab, all of the domains of the national performance measures are listed out on the left here. And let's pretend, for the sake of argument, that you really need some help with teaming, and structure and process is the piece that's really kind of tripping you up. Well, here are some resources that you can use. Example worksheets for shared definitions of terms, leading mentally healthy schools, planning cycle, guiding questions, all kinds of stuff. I'll be honest with you, it's a bit overwhelming. And I think that there's certainly some redundancy within the resources, but there's a lot of good stuff in there. If you take some time to take a peek, it's well worth it. Outside of the resources, this is one of my favorite parts of the SHAPE system. Are there any districts in here that are engaging in or are interested in engaging in universal mental health screening? Anne-Marie, Tina, Bethany, lots of, all right, so lots of you. So one of the questions that I get asked a lot around screening is like, where do we even start in terms of selecting a measure? We have no idea what's out there. So let's pretend for a minute that you need a measure for depression and it's for screening. The kids that you want to screen are 12 years old. It has to be offered in Spanish. Students are going to report it out and it needs to be free. Well, there you go. Those are some measures that you can use. And you can click right into each one. Here's the PHQ-9. It will tell you the versions available. It will give you some sample items, the languages it's offered in, access to the specific measures. It will tell you scoring interpretation, benchmark information, some key information on the measure. Like this is a 2-page PD session for your team to help them to understand how to use this measure. Does that make sense to people? Who here didn't know about the screening and assessment library, but is pretty pumped about it now? Yeah, Paula. Good. This stuff is free. Please use it. Okay. There is another assessment in here on trauma responsiveness. It's called the TRSIA, Trauma Responsive Schools Implementation Assessment. It works just like the quality assessment, but it's focused on trauma and your trauma responsiveness as a district. I would say another great assessment to consider if the flavor of work that you want to work on the most is trauma-informed practice. Okay, so enough about the SHAPE system for a minute. I do want to go back to the slides. And I'm wondering if we have enough people to do breakout. We can certainly do this as one big group if you're open to it. Yes? Okay. So I'm going to drop in the chat the SHAPE summary report for the Courtney Tucker Regional School District. It's not a real school district, but it should be. Oh, you know what? Let me drop it in the chat again. Here we go. So what I'd like for you to do, and I'll pull this up together with you, is I'd like to run through this and I'd like to ask some questions about this report. Let's pretend like you and me are on the same team. This is the Courtney Tucker Regional School District Comprehensive School Mental Health System team, and we are looking to improve our practice. We just took the SHAPE system assessment together, and we need to determine what action steps we're going to undertake as a team. Make sense? So what I would like for you to do is to consider what are some targeted areas of need that should be a focus in our district action plan. Some stuff that we should definitely address because we are lacking in that area. I also want you to be sensitive to strengths that we can draw upon, some things that are working well that we should celebrate and maybe replicate in all buildings, maybe even some change ideas. So I'm noticing that this is a problem and I'm thinking that this is something we can do about it. Does that make sense to people? Needs, strengths, ways in which we can improve a specific area. So how about this? I'm going to give you 5 minutes to be able to take a peek at this report and address those things. Can you be ready to report out at 4:13? Yeah? Laura's also telling me that there are 4 breakout groups ready to go. And I'm thinking, let's put you in breakout groups just for 5 minutes. Make sense? Okay. I'm going to stop sharing. And you are all welcome to join your breakout groups now. I'll be filtering around. Okay, I heard some great conversation. I saw some new faces. We caught you in the breakout rooms. This always happens. I love it. What do we think? Strengths, relative weaknesses that we want to address? Any change ideas? Who would like to share? Come off mute, and I can kind of navigate throughout this sample report to kind of highlight what you're focused on. What do we got?
I'll share something. When I was looking at the needs assessment page, it's a few pages in when we were talking about it. I thought it was really interesting that their strengths are that they can like conduct resource mapping and identify the services, but when it comes to the execution and implementation and aligning services and support, there seems to be like no follow through. So it's like and sometimes I really think like the mapping part and identifying what you need can be really challenging. And so the inability to kind of make those connections feels like a good area that you could work on, because I feel like the hard part's already been done. I work in a community that doesn't have a lot of resources. So when it comes to us trying to do resource mapping and identify places, that's probably where we spend a lot more time. I think we wish we could execute it.
Yeah.
So I thought that
Totally
was really
fair.
fascinating.
I love that. I love that. It begs the question, right? Like you see some of these strengths and weaknesses side by side, and you're like, well, why? Like, for me, I want to know, is there a barrier to using that resource map that we maybe need to unpack as a team? I don't know. Good call, Tina. Who else has a strength, weakness, or change idea?
We noticed that the tier 1 processes were strong, but that when you move to tiers 2 and tier 3, the scores were lower. But then also above under teaming, there were stronger community partnerships and community referrals. So it looked like possibly when things were getting a little bit tricky and moving into tier 2, tier 3, students were getting referred out rather than strengthening the in-district supports.
I love the work that you and Tina are talking about in terms of like trying to understand the story behind these data. I think that's the hardest part. Like, it's easy to be like, well, look, they don't monitor student progress across tiers really well. But to understand the story behind that, I think is the heavy lifting. And it seems like you both really were able to do that well. So that's awesome. And I would tend to agree with you. It looks like tier 1's pretty good here. They've got a good score, 4.6 composite score. They're doing some good stuff. Well done. What else? Let's get maybe 1 or 2 more.
It seemed like the systematic implementation was low as, and I got to go back, sorry. It was there on the screen a second ago. And then the, both the systematic and then, oh shoot, found it. Like they had the interventions, but they didn't systematically implement or progress monitor
I
progress.
see.
There was a lot of red in those areas.
Fair, totally fair. What do you think? Does anyone have an action item that they would want to put on the table for this pretend district or our team, as it were? Something that we should focus on for sure, for sure. And it can be in any domain.
I would argue the monitoring fidelity and or different ways that they express that across the report. If you're not assessing whether what you're doing is working, it's kind of an exercise in futility. So
Totally fair, Anne Marie. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Are we doing the thing that we say we're doing? Because if we're not, then we care about it. We just don't care about it enough to do it right. Okay. Quick check-in around this tool, this practice. Is this something that you feel would be useful to your district in determining the needs relative to comprehensive school mental health? Give me a quick thumbs up, thumbs down. Seeing lots of thumbs up. Cool. Okay. This is free, friends. Again, I would recommend taking this on your own to start if you're going to be facilitating that discussion. And truthfully, take it on your own to start, even if you're not going to be facilitating that discussion, if you're going to be a member of that team, just so you can orient yourself to these concepts of what a comprehensive school mental health system is all about. And again, this is a systems level needs assessment. We're going to take a look at another needs assessment next that is really more about evidence-based practice. The reason why this is such an important needs assessment is I think that we fail a lot of times to ask questions of our mental health staff about what they're ready to do and what they're not ready to do. Who here feels like they've done a really, let me put it this way. Do you feel like you've got a great sense of the capacity of your staff relative to evidence-based practice? Anybody? Are we good in that, right? Or are we not feeling so great? Kind of in between, Tina, Clancy, your thumbs down, in between. Yeah, I think it probably, I've got to imagine that it runs the gamut, and that there are some districts where you're like, no, I know what they can do, I know what they can't do. And for others, it's just not on the radar. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, we can get at that. This needs assessment was designed to really ask about the readiness of your staff to implement evidence-based interventions, simple things. And I'll actually, let me pull this up so I can show you what I mean by these things. Evidence-based interventions, things like consultation with teachers, things like providing fidget objects, gradual exposure. These are simple things. Everybody's checking off boxes here, right? When we get into evidence-based programs, I'm talking about more curriculum-based kinds of things, break free from depression, coping, CAT zones of regulation, social thinking, stuff like that. And we're asking people, do you have training? Do you not have training? Are you interested in training? Are you currently doing this? That's really critical information to be able to understand what your people are doing, what they're capable of doing, and also what they wish they could be doing if they had training. We get all the way up to and including evidence-based therapeutic approaches, CBT, TFCBT, REBT, all the stuff that ends in T. Now, the reason that this is so important is because without this information, it's going to be really hard to understand what professional development is necessary to get your people ready to go. You're ultimately going to be spinning your wheels and guessing at readiness, guessing at the right training to put in place, and also not really having a strong understanding of what internal capacity you already have. If you implement this really well, it's going to do a few things. It's going to lower the temperature around evidence-based practice, because ultimately everybody is going to be checking off some of this stuff. They're going to be looking at those evidence-based interventions and saying, yeah, you know, I do that stuff. You are going to gather information and identify critical needs to create a PD plan, which is essential. And you're also, if you do this in a not de-identified way, so it's not anonymous, you're going to find your early adopters, those individuals that you can leverage for coaching, those individuals that you can put at the forefront of this implementation. That makes sense? Is it maybe the case, not in your district, of course, but in a district that you know about, that the PD plan for mental health staff sometimes is looking a little wonky? Is that fair? Maybe it's, we forgot about PD for the mental health staff, have them go to the Eureka math training. Who here knows a district for whom the counselors do not get professional development that aligns with their specific needs? Tracy, Clancy, I'm seeing people. Okay. If we want to address it really well, we need data. And this is the kind of needs assessment that gets at that. So what I'd like for you to do is to take this assessment right now. I don't want you to take a ton of time with this. I just want you to get a feel for what it looks like. And I am going to, in real time, show you the results, and we can have a very brief discussion about it. So click on the link in the chat, and I'm going to do the same. Actually, as you're filling it out, just based on time, I want to make sure we've got enough time to get through all the stuff. I'm going to show you the responses from previous cohorts of people who have attended these trainings. Right out the gate, you're going to be able to see, well, what basic evidence-based interventions are being used. I think this is helpful. It's not the most helpful piece of this assessment, but it at least shows you that like some stuff's happening. Excuse me. We can check off the evidence-based intervention box. And it also helps you to understand, like, what are those other EBIs that are not necessarily being talked about or represented up here, but that are, you know, good to point out. This is where it starts to get real interesting. Can you see those bar charts, or do you want me to zoom in a little bit? Zoom in? Zoom in. Okay. What evidence-based programs do or could you use in your practice? When I look at this, I want to be sensitive to things where in red, people are interested in training, so I can see that I can problem solve. There's some good interest there. Signs of self-injury, okay, some good interest. Coping CAT, for sure. What about interested, and we actually have people who are already implementing. So where there is good representation of red and green together. Looking, oh, this is pretty good, red and green. So mindfulness-based stress reduction, that's something that you might have some internal capacity that you maybe didn't even know about, that you can leverage for internal coaching to address the requests of these individuals. Does this make a little bit of sense? Okay. Ultimately, I'm going to figure out by looking at these data what I don't have to worry about in terms of training, what I might want to implement even more because it's currently being implemented. I look at something like this, signs of suicide. Great. Oh, and look, some have training, but they're not implementing. Well, that's weird. I want to address that. And we have others who are interested in training. This looks like an area where we can definitely capitalize. We've got some stuff going on, some people that have training but aren't implementing, and some people that want training. Great. That's the trifecta that we're going to want. And then lastly, we're going to get into evidence-based therapeutic approaches. What's currently being implemented in this fake district? Well, some psychoed. For what is there great interest in training? Looks like REBT for sure. Is this a tool that you feel like could help you in your journey to understand the needs of your staff relative to evidence-based practice? What do we think? Quick thumbs up or thumbs down? Okay. So this is open to you. You're welcome to it. I hope you'll steal it. I hope you'll use it to, I would recommend implementing this with your mental health staff. So think school counselors, school social workers, adjustment counselors, psychologists. If you've got a strong understanding of your district's needs, then you can capitalize on some pretty great professional development. And again, know who your early adopters are, know where you can leverage some coaching internally. Any questions about this assessment? Again, it's another flavor of needs assessment. Nothing? Okay. 30 minutes, my friends. I know you're all looking at the clock. I'm going to drag this out to the last possible minute. Let's look at resource mapping real quick. Visually represent and share information about internal and external supports and services. That's all we're really talking about here. And Tina brought up a good point around, like, you know, if you can get that going, that's pretty strong work. You can leverage that really well. Or, you know, based on the results that we saw in that assessment, that team wasn't necessarily leveraging their resource mapping well. This is some stuff that I would point to that I think is in the vein of resource mapping. Understanding the number and type of staff in your district. I think that in a very big district, this is really essential. But it can be the case that in a smaller district, you've got some disproportionality between staffing between buildings that needs to be unpacked too. I've seen districts that have loaded up a single school with lots of staff, but maybe a couple miles away, you've got half the staff that you would expect to see. If no one's looking at this information on a long enough timeline, stuff's going to get weird. Things are going to go awry. So understanding what you have and what you don't have and keeping an eye on that year to year, really essential. We saw this before when we did the demo, so I won't go into this too much. And I think we've got enough time to do this Jamboard. I'm going to drop this into the chat. Who here has used Jamboard before? All right, a bunch of you. So in this Jamboard, what I'd like for you to do is ultimately to map out the services and supports that are currently offered in our collective district. We're going to pretend like we're all representatives from the same district here. And you're going to use the sticky note feature to be able to drop sticky notes onto the MTSS triangle. And ultimately, I would love to see what is going on. And if people have questions about the different services and supports that are offered, you can certainly chime in. Looks like you're all able to access it. So I'm going to show you how it works to start. You can see my cursor. Yes. Okay. I'm going to click on the sticky note feature and I'm going to type in CBT groups. We love them. And I'm going to drop this right here. There we go. Someone else figured out how to use it. School-wide mindfulness practice. Excellent. That FBA, behavior plan. Signs of suicide. As you're going through this, I gotta ask, have you done this in your district within the past couple of years? I got to imagine a lot of things have changed as a function of the pandemic. Probably pretty important to unpack what's currently happening across your tiered service array. Seen lots of good examples in here. Got some bright program happening. Love it. DBT skills in schools. No matter what, every time I do this Jamboard activity, someone feels compelled to like, no, mine's gonna be a little bit off center. And I love that about all of you that you do that. Individual counseling, sure. So I think you get the point. This is a pretty important activity to undertake. Can I get a show of hands? Who here has done this in your district before? Suzanne, you have. Anne Marie, Tina, okay. Jean, good. If you haven't, I would strongly recommend it, because what comes out of a conversation like this is often, I had no idea we were doing that. I had no idea we had the resources to support that. I had no idea what that even was. And if we aren't all on the same page about the things that are happening within our tiered service array, then we're not able to capitalize on that, leverage that, scale that up. So as part of your needs assessment and resource mapping, getting at a tiered services map that reflects your district's services is a pretty, it's a task that can be pretty fun. Get some people around the table without masks for the first time in 2 years and like actually fill out that tiered service array. And incredibly instructive. If you go through this experience and you've got nothing happening at tier 3 or vice versa, nothing happening at tier 1, that's going to call out some actions that you need to include in your action plan. Good. I wanted to make sure that this was really, really practical this session. You know, when the Thriving Minds team was talking, needs assessment and resource mapping has to be something that you can undertake, and it can't be this ephemeral and like ultimately like theory-based thing. We have to be able to do this. I know that you all need to go back to your districts and do this stuff. So to date, we've talked about needs assessment at the system level using the SHAPE system, which is free and pretty straightforward. We've got the EBP needs assessment, which is focusing on your mental health staff's readiness, and then that can get you to a PD plan. And we've got this tiered services map that's going to help you to understand the services that are happening across your tiered system of support. So far, is any of this stuff outside of the realm of, yeah, we can do this? It's pretty straightforward stuff. Practical. We hope so. We want you to be able to use this stuff. Okay. So in the interest of time, let's keep moving. Got about 23 minutes left. We talked about that professional development planning necessity that the EBP needs assessment can inform. You know, I think these are questions to ask for sure when you're developing a PD plan. What does professional development currently look like for counseling staff? I asked you this, and there were some people that felt like, it's not great, or it's kind of in between. I do know that sometimes it's a forgotten group of individuals, especially when there's a lack of clinical leadership within the district. So our specialized positions need specialized professional development. That's just it. So we got to know what the needs are for our people and how we can meet those needs. Do we have internal capacity to deliver PD? Again, who are those early adopters, those individuals that you can leverage for coaching on those PD days? External facilitation of PD. I mean, you're currently doing that, right? Thriving Minds. Love it. Find ways that you can capitalize on those opportunities out there. Take a look at the Thriving Minds landing page. Lots of training coming up. How can you ensure that there's uptake with the PD? That's a pretty huge question. One and done training doesn't change practice. Paul talks about this a lot. Coaching is the key to ensuring that practice is undertaken effectively. So spray and pray training, you can't go with that, all right? You got to follow up. You have to have opportunities for questions and coaching. You have to have opportunities for co-facilitation of things. I think a really great example of that is group therapy. Who here has a group therapy model that you're feeling pretty good about in your district? Quick show of hands. Maybe Suzanne? Okay. Suzanne, I'm thinking like, if you have someone that's really a skillful group facilitator, what would happen if you paired them with someone that needed a little bit more help? And they co-facilitated that group such that you're building capacity in vivo, and that peer consultation can really take off. That to me is an opportunity to capitalize on the skills that your people already have, that internal coaching that can happen. So food for thought as you start to build out these systems, that internal capacity is key. What else? What components other than the PD session serve as supporting structures to sustain participant growth? All questions we need to ask. You saw this before, you saw this before. Let's see. We can talk about that. No, we're not gonna talk about this. We're gonna talk about this. This is what I'm getting at when we talk about that, those early adopters that are so essential. We're really getting at diffusion of innovation theory, which is this idea that change doesn't happen at the same rate for everyone. That ultimately there's a continuum that we need to be mindful of. If you decided tomorrow that you were going to implement universal screening, you would have some people that would be pretty pumped. They would enjoy that. They would want to do it right away. You're going to have a couple others that are going to need some convincing. They have some questions. They want to know how this is going to go. And then you've got others that are going to really need a lot of coaching and training and support and understanding before they lean into that practice. I guess my message to you is, as we talk about resource mapping, as we talk about ultimately resource utilization as well, and this idea of PD planning, lean into those individuals for whom they are excited about the work. It's going to be okay to capitalize on your early adopters. They're going to be ready to go. They will build capacity and further your implementation of these practices. You're not going to have to worry about them ultimately being led astray. They want to do the work. And over time, they're going to serve as a beacon that this is possible to do within a school. This is possible to do within our school and our department. Everyone's going to need some level of training. I think that that's just fair. But as we're talking about PD planning, I'm just kind of reminded of the fact that we have to cater our training to the different categories of the different adopter categories. For some, it's going to be quick training and coaching and move to implementation. And for others, you might just need to have to build in those extra opportunities for coaching. But certainly, sometimes I hear this desire to like change the department or the system overnight. And there's this frustration sometimes with like, not everyone's on board. And I got to remind people like, well, who is on board? Who could you ask to do progress monitoring tomorrow? And they'll do it. And you can start to say that we're building capacity for progress monitoring, because that's the thing to focus on. That makes sense? Okay. Suzanne's with me. She's the only one. That's sad. No. Okay. Couple more points about PD planning. I think we're going to wrap it up. I planned way too many slides today, friends, which is probably a good thing. But we'll get out of here on time. When we talk about PD plans, I don't want to fail to recognize that we do need to take a bifurcated approach to this. You're going to need training for everyone, and you're going to need specialized training for your mental health staff. I think one of the things that I see unfortunately happening sometimes is that we do the thing for everybody and we forget that we need to do the specialized thing for these specialized instructional support personnel, which is school counselors, school adjustment counselors, social workers, and school psychs. That's not to say that if you're going to do a really strong training on, I don't know, collaborative problem solving, yeah, involve everyone. That's going to be important. Also, don't forget that targeted training around cognitive behavioral therapy, yeah, that's going to be important for your mental health staff. So having a PD plan that is inclusive of everyone and is specialized for your mental health staff. Again, that train and hope model of professional development is something we want to avoid. We want to ensure that there are great coaching opportunities and on-the-job training. So training that's going to occur throughout the implementation. Talk to people about the why of the professional development. That's going to be essential too. There are going to be some people that just don't understand, why are we talking about things like cognitive behavioral therapy? I've never done this before in my career, and helping them to understand, well, the reason that we've selected this is based on data that we received from the evidence-based practice needs assessment. It directly aligns with the needs assessment we conducted on the presenting issues of our students, and we know that this is an evidence-based practice, so that's why we're doing it. And that's not going to be enough for some people. They're still going to complain about it, and that's okay. But you will have made your argument, and you will put that argument to bed. This last bullet, I think, is one of the pieces that we forget to account for the most. Planning with the future in mind. Let's pretend like you all undergo a training series over the next couple months in cognitive behavioral therapy, and you feel great about it. What happens in the fall when you onboard new staff? Do they have access to that training? They don't. And we start the process all over again. So when we talk about a professional development plan, it really needs to be one that extends long into the future. It cannot just be about one and done. It has to be about how can we replicate this experience for the staff that we onboard in the future. Otherwise, we're just going to go back to the way it was in 2 or 3 years. Not to say that we're going to have full staff turnover in 2 or 3 years every 2 or 3 years, but it is going to be the case that we'll lose momentum and sustainability. So sustainable PD planning is critical. I'm actually thinking that we're going to stop because we're going to go way too far down the rabbit hole with resource utilization. I will say that we are going to be running a leveraging all mental health staff training. Laura, I don't know if you can look that up real quick and drop in the chat. Thank you.
Yes.
Which is going to cover a ton around staffing models, resource utilization, caseloads, all kinds of stuff like that. Which is what we were going to tack on to the last part of this, but it's really a topic that deserves its own hour, and you will get that. Laura's going to drop in the chat. So I'm going to fast forward ahead to the end. There we go. This is the landing page for Thriving Minds. You can sign up here to be able to get alerts about new training opportunities. May 18th, 3:30 to 4:30, we will be back here with some discussion around school mental health staffing models and really sending a strong argument that you could potentially leverage your school-based mental health staff a lot more than you maybe currently are. And some of you are probably like, no, we're good. And I'd ask you to maybe come on out, check it out. It is a session that gets generates a lot of questions and really challenges beliefs that we have around the roles and licenses and staffing models that currently exist. So if you're interested in going down that road, certainly attend on May 18th. And Jean's already in. I love it, Jean. Thanks for that. So questions we've got a little bit of time, and I don't want to fail to give you a little bit of time back if you want to just get out of here, but I do welcome your questions. So let me pause and see what we got.
I have a quick question. I'm sorry, I was driving home and then I transitioned to my laptop.
Oh,
So
good.
the survey that you had us do, is that shareable with our staff? And if so, how do we get the results of that?
Yeah, you need only make a copy, and you know what, Tracy, if you shoot me a quick email. Actually, you know what, Laura, I'm wondering if we can just embed this within the. I can get the copy of that thing, the EBP needs assessment, and I can share the link such that you can manipulate it. I've got a copy.
Great.
And then, yeah, you're welcome to make a copy for your district and share it out with your staff, and then you can see the results. And you can set it up so that it's anonymous, or you can set it up so you can find your early adopters.
Right. So my next question is, we're a pretty small district. And I'm thinking, leveraging the staff is really important. And I don't know what other people's thoughts are, because obviously specific mental health things need to be done with school counselors. But I am interested in, some of these things, especially the needs assessment. And you did say we should do it ourselves. And so I'm gonna work on that. But I'm wondering how many people utilize their PE and health teachers for these kinds of things, because I only have 4 counselors.
Yeah.
And it's a lot. It's a lot. I'm already thinking of how do I frame this with them of, hey, I want to do this because it's going to show what our needs are. And they're going to go, oh my God, I can't handle one more thing. So
Yeah, no, I think that's a really fair question. And thank you, Anne-Marie, for offering that in the chat. Anne-Marie uses PE and health to do sex ed. Okay. Is there other stuff that we can get out of PE and health teachers? I certainly think so. I'm thinking particularly tier 1, Tracy.
yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, for what it's worth, the other thing I think is that's where it's super helpful to have a framework, because I know sounds like it's there are differences among resourcing in schools, but the school we always point to honestly is Westboro High. It's so incredible, because somebody was mentioning in the MTSS mapping piece the DBT skills in schools framework, but in that school, in PE and health, all 9th and 10th graders are getting instruction in DBT skills, and then that creates the common language across the school. And then they've built their tier 2 and tier 3 supports out of the DBT framework sort of as well. And then they've been actually training teachers on a platoon basis over time on a deeper understanding of DBT. So it's this idea of having a shared framework for thinking about, mental health, and then kind of aligning everybody around that. And that's a 5 to 10 year project. But on the other hand, they've stuck with it, and just the level of alignment across the building it's the highest kind of aligned level around a single framework that I think I've probably ever seen, I guess. So yeah.
All right, thanks. Well,
I have a question about the SHAPE system as it reflects district information versus building specific information within, as you're trying to assess the whole district, but also each building is trying to assess what their unique needs are at their age level. Does it differentiate?
Yeah, it definitely can. You can get a district level account, you can get school accounts. So it's a matter of kind of just navigating the different accounts that you would need. But I tend to recommend starting at the district level so that you can get a sense of, I guess I'll say this, I think it makes good sense to start at the district level a lot of times, because you're able to leverage maybe the administrative staff that are overseeing the whole district. But I see great value in doing that school level assessment in short order afterwards, so that you can start to get at those individual needs. There are some district level systems that I think are important to have in place, so that you can drive implementation effectively across all schools. But that's not to say that that school level perspective is incredibly important and needs to be honored too. But yeah, you can do that. You can do both levels.
Okay. And that would look like starting at the district level to have that more bigger system kind of foundation. And then from that, the individual school would develop a separate SHAPE account. It wouldn't be connected. Is that what I understand?
Within the same, I want to say within the same account.
It would
you
be,
can-
okay.
Yeah, but yeah, shouldn't be an issue at all to get it going. And there are some great tutorials on the SHAPE system to like set up different kinds of accounts. Tracy, I'm seeing in the chat, there can be some fear in implementing assessments simply because the results require action. Yeah, totally fair. I think at the end of the day, if there's desire to do this work, then yeah, people are going to want to do the assessment to do it right. But it's a fair point, Tracy. Certainly, you know, when we assess for needs and we have to look at the results and be like, oh man, there's quite a bit of work to do. That can be tough. But I want to flip that and say, if you conduct the assessment and you are taking the time and energy to really honestly reflect on needs, I'm going to say that puts you in a different category. You're actually being honest about the work. You're farther along than someone who's maybe deluding themselves into thinking they've got everything figured out. Lauren, what do you got? Oh, you're off mute. I thought maybe you had a question.
Oh, I think earlier I was going to chime in and just say that in the past, when I've worked at an elementary school, I, as the school social worker, would go into gym class and assist the phys ed teacher with doing like second step lessons. And now that I'm at the high school, I know historically they've also partnered with school adjustment counselors to do SOS. So I think that there's definitely some room. And I think, as John had mentioned earlier, when you partner a mental health professional with those teachers, that might be a good way to start out and build comfortability.
Nice. Thanks, Lauren. Really good insight. Any other questions? Well, friends, I really enjoyed being here with you on a Tuesday afternoon, right after break. It was great to see the engagement, the questions. I appreciate your participation in this activity-heavy session. So good on you for taking the time. If you've got follow-up questions, please reach out. I hope to see you at some upcoming sessions. Thank you so much to Paul and Laura for co-facilitating. And I hope you have a good night. Take good care, everybody.